They said an Omega's kiss was worthless, until mine became the only thing standing between the Alpha King and death. The stone floor was cold against my knees, but I'd stopped noticing things like that months ago. When you scrub the same corridor for hours every day, your body goes numb. It's a mercy, really. I wrung out my rag into the bucket, watching dirty water swirl grey and lifeless. The palace kitchens were far behind me now. I'd been sent to clean the king's private wing, an assignment none of the other servants wanted. Too quiet, too isolated. One wrong move here and you'd disappear. I was good at disappearing, though. Had been ever since my pack rejected me 2 years ago. The sound of footsteps made me press closer to the wall. Heavy boots, multiple sets. I recognized the measured pace of the royal guard. But there was something else. Something off. "Clear," a voice called out. Then I heard him. Alpha King Dominic Blackthorne's deep voice echoed down the corridor, discussing border patrols with his captain. I should have left. Should have grabbed my bucket and vanished into the servants' passages, but I froze like prey, hoping he'd pass without noticing the Omega girl making herself small against the wall. The air changed. One moment, silence. The next, chaos. Metal sang as swords left sheaths. A guard screamed, actually screamed, and hit the floor with a wet thud. I looked up in time to see 5 figures in black descend on the king's party like shadows, given teeth. Assassins. Everything happened fast. The guards fought back, but these weren't ordinary attackers. They moved like wolves even in human form. Inhumanly quick. One of them threw something, a small glass vial that shattered against the king's chest. The Alpha King staggered. I watched in frozen horror as Dominic Blackthorne, the most powerful wolf in the realm, dropped to one knee. His hand clawed at his chest where the liquid had splashed. Even from 15 feet away I could smell it. Silver and nightshade, the killing combination. The assassins melted away as quickly as they'd come, leaving 4 dead guards and a dying king. Move, Arya, move. But I couldn't. My wolf was howling inside me, a sound of such anguish I thought I'd break. This wasn't my king, wasn't my alpha. I was nothing to him, less than nothing. A rejected Omega without a pack. Dominic's eyes met mine. They were amber, like autumn fire, and they were dimming. He tried to speak, but blood flecked his lips instead of words. 60 seconds. That's how long you have once silver lace nightshade enters the bloodstream. My grandmother's voice echoed in my head, a memory from childhood before the rejection, before everything went wrong. She'd been a healer, had taught me things the pack said Omegas had no business knowing. An Omega's kiss can neutralize most poisons. We carry life in our very breath, child. It's our greatest gift and our deepest secret. 30 seconds, maybe less. I dropped my rag and ran. My knees hit the blood-slicked floor beside him. Up close, the Alpha King was devastating. All hard edges and a brutal beauty, even while dying. His hand shot out and gripped my wrist with crushing strength. "No," he managed. "Run." "Shut up," I whispered. Then I pressed my lips to his. The effect was immediate and electric. Heat poured from my mouth into his. Not sexual, but something deeper, something primal. I felt the poison fighting back, felt it trying to burrow deeper into his system. My wolf surged forward, lending me strength I didn't know I possessed. The silver burned away like morning mist. The nightshade broke apart under the force of whatever power flowed between us. And then something else happened. A thread of pure golden light snapped into existence, binding my chest to his. The mate bond. I felt it lock into place with such force that I gasped against his mouth. Impossible. This was impossible. The Alpha King already had a chosen mate. I'd seen Lady Seraphina myself, beautiful and cold as winter, walking these halls like she owned them. Dominic's eyes flew open. His hand came up to cup the back of my head, and for one breathless moment, he kissed me back. really kissed me. His lips moved against mine with heat and hunger and something like recognition. The bond sang between us, golden and perfect and absolutely forbidden. Then reality crashed back. Footsteps thundered toward us, voices shouted. The head guard, Marcus Steele, rounded the corner with a dozen soldiers at his back. He took in the scene with one sweeping glance, his king on the floor, a lowly Omega girl with her lips on royal flesh, 4 dead guards. His face went cold with fury. "Get her off him!" Hands yanked me backward. I hit the floor hard, tasting blood. Dominic was already being hauled to his feet, surrounded by guards checking him for injuries. His eyes found mine across the chaos, amber and burning and utterly unreadable. "She attacked the king," Marcus roared. "Seize her." "No." Dominic's voice was raw. "She saved..." But Marcus was already speaking over him. "The girl will be taken to the dungeons for questioning. Your Majesty, you need the healers. Now." More guards poured in. Someone clapped silver chains around my wrists, silver that burned against my skin, even though I was only an Omega. They dragged me away as I watched Dominic over my shoulder. He was standing now, Marcus speaking urgently in his ear while gesturing at me. The last thing I saw before they hauled me around the corner was the war on the Alpha King's face, and the small, satisfied smile on Marcus Steele's lips. The dungeon was exactly as cold and miserable as expected. They threw me into a cell with stone walls that wept moisture and a thin layer of mouldy straw on the floor. The silver chains had been removed, but my wrists still bore angry red marks. I collapsed against the far wall, my body finally catching up with what had happened. I'd kissed the Alpha King. I'd felt the mate bond snap into place. He was mine, and I was his, and it didn't matter at all because he belonged to Lady Seraphina's Northern Pack Alliance, because I was nobody, because I'd just given them every excuse they needed to execute me. Hours passed, or maybe days. It was hard to tell in the dark. Guards came and went, bringing stale bread and water but no information. I dozed fitfully, jerking awake at every sound. Then the burning started. It began as a tingle on my left wrist, right where Dominic had gripped me. I looked down and watched in horror as a mark appeared on my skin, glowing silver in the darkness. It was beautiful and terrible. A crescent moon wrapped in thorns. The Alpha King's mark. But something was wrong. The design was jagged, incomplete, as if someone had stopped the artist mid-stroke. The edges bled and blurred, and pain radiated up my arm in waves. Well, a voice croaked from the cell beside mine. "Haven't seen one of those in 30 years. I pressed against the bars separating us. In the darkness, I could barely make out an old woman, her hair white as bone, her eyes fill me with age. "What is it?" My voice came out desperate. The old woman laughed, a sound like dead leaves scraping stone. "You've been marked by a cursed king, girl. Look at it, see how it can't complete? He can't finish a mate bond. Hasn't been able to since the night his first mate died and the witch's curse took hold." My blood turned to ice. "What curse?" "The Alpha King is dying," she whispered. "Has been for 5 years now. Just very, very slowly. The curse prevents him from completing any mate bond, and without a true mate bond, an alpha's power eventually consumes him from the inside. That's why he chose Lady Seraphina. She's strong enough to stand beside a cursed king without bonding to him, a political arrangement." The pain in my wrist intensified. I clutched it to my chest, feeling the incomplete mark pulse against my palm. "But now you've bonded to him," the old woman continued, her voice almost gleeful. "Except the curse won't let the bond complete. You're tied to him, girl, but the thread is severed. The magic doesn't know what to do with that. It'll tear you both apart." "How long?" The question fell from my lips like a prayer. The old woman's smile was full of rotten teeth. "A month, maybe less. You'll both die unless the curse is broken. The king will finally be consumed by his own power, and you," she laughed again, "an incomplete mate bond is poison. You'll waste away, burning from the inside out, as your wolf tries to reach a mate it can never have. I slid down the wall, cradling my marked wrist. Somewhere above me, the Alpha King was being counselled to execute me, to protect his alliance, to save himself the trouble of a packless Omega claiming a bond no one wanted. He didn't know we were both already dying. The mark burned brighter, and I closed my eyes against the pain, wondering which would kill me first, the King's executioner or the curse slowly tearing my soul apart. Chapter 2. The sound of boots on stone woke me from a fitful sleep. I'd been dreaming of amber eyes and golden threads, of a kiss that tasted like fire and fate. My wrist throbbed where the incomplete mark burned beneath my skin, a constant reminder that I was dying by degrees. The footsteps stopped outside my cell. I didn't move from where I huddled in the corner, didn't look up. Let them come. Let them drag me to whatever execution they'd planned. At least it would be faster than wasting away from a bond that could never be completed. Leave us. My head snapped up at that voice, deep and commanding, unmistakably royal. Alpha King Dominic Blackthorne stood outside my cell, dressed not in his formal regalia, but in simple dark clothes. In the torchlight, his face was all sharp angles and shadows. Behind him, guards retreated down the corridor until their footsteps faded to nothing. He was alone. The king produced a key and unlocked my cell door. The metal groaned as it swung open. But he didn't enter, just stood there in the doorway, watching me with those autumn fire eyes. "You should be resting," I said, my voice rough from disuse. "The poison is gone, thanks to you." He stepped inside, and the small cell seemed to shrink around his presence. Power rolled off him in waves, making my Omega instincts scream at me to bow, to submit, to show my throat. But something else, something tied to that golden thread between us, made me hold his gaze instead. The mark on my wrist pulsed with heat. "Why are you here?" I asked. Dominic moved closer, then stopped as if hitting an invisible wall. His jaw clenched. "Because we need to talk about what happened in that corridor." "You mean when I assaulted you?" The bitterness leaked through despite my best efforts. "That's what your head guard called it. Marcus is—" Dominic ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture so unguarded it startled me. "He's protecting the crown, as he should. What happened between us threatens a delicate political alliance." "The Lady Seraphina." "Yes." His eyes tracked to my wrist, where I knew the mark was visible even in the dim light. "Show me." It wasn't a request. I extended my arm, watching his face as he took in the incomplete mate mark. His mark burned into my skin. Something flickered in his expression. Pain, maybe, or regret. "It's the same," he said quietly. "What?" Instead of answering, Dominic pushed up his left sleeve. My breath caught. His wrist bore a mark identical to mine. The crescent moon wrapped in thorns, jagged and incomplete, bleeding at the edges. The king's mark on the king himself. "I don't understand," I whispered. Dominic let his sleeve fall and moved to the far side of the cell, putting distance between us. Even then, I felt the pull of the bond, that golden thread trying desperately to draw us together. "5 years ago," he began, his voice low, "I refused a match proposed by a powerful witch from the Shadowfen Marsh. Her daughter was beautiful, ambitious, and completely unsuitable as a queen. I rejected her politely. The witch did not take it well." He turned to face me, and the torchlight caught the hollows beneath his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. This was a man carrying weight that would have crushed anyone else. "She cursed me," he continued, "said I would never complete a true mate bond, that any wolf who tried to bond with me would waste away and die, consumed by a connection that could never be fulfilled. I thought she was bluffing. Witches make threats when they're angry. But then I met someone, a woman I thought might be my mate. The bond started to form, And within days, she was burning up with fever, dying from the inside out. My hand went to my wrist involuntarily. What happened to her? I rejected the bond before it could kill her, severed it completely. His voice was flat, emotionless. She survived. Hates me now, but she survived. So you chose Lady Seraphina? I chose survival, he corrected. Seraphina is not my mate. She's a political alliance with the Northern Pax, strong enough to stand beside a cursed king without bonding to him. We have an arrangement. She gets to be queen. I get the military support I need to hold the kingdom together. I stood, my legs shaky beneath me. Then why are you here? Why tell me any of this? Dominic closed the distance between us in 2 strides. Up close, he was overwhelming. Taller, broader, radiating an alpha dominance that made my wolf whimper and yearn. But it was the vulnerability in his eyes that truly undid me. Because you're my true mate, he said, and I felt the bond snap into place the moment your lips touched mine. And because... He grabbed my wrist, holding the incomplete mark up between us. This shouldn't be possible. I've trained myself to resist the bond, to reject it before it can form. But with you, it happened anyway. Incomplete, broken. But there. The old woman in the next cell said we'll both die within a month. Something dark crossed his face. That sounds like Helda. She's been down here so long she's half mad. But yes, she's right. An incomplete mate bond is poison to both parties. You'll waste away. I'll be consumed by my own alpha power with no mate bond to ground it. The casual way he discussed our deaths should have terrified me. Instead, I felt something else rising in my chest. Anger. So what? I pulled my wrist from his grip. You came down here to apologize before you have me executed, to ease your conscience? No. Dominic's voice dropped to a growl. I came to offer you a bargain. I waited, my heart pounding. Help me find the witch who cursed me, he said. Help me break this curse so we can complete the mate bond properly, or sever it entirely without killing us both. Do this, and I'll give you everything. Freedom, wealth, your own pack to lead. You'll never have to scrub another floor or bow to another alpha who thinks you're worthless. And if I refuse, then we both die. He said it simply, like discussing the weather. The incomplete bond will tear us apart from the inside out. You have nothing to lose, Aria. He knew my name. I don't know why that detail caught me, but it did. What about Lady Seraphina, I asked. What about your political alliance? Let me worry about Seraphina. There was something in his tone that made me think he didn't realize just how much he should be worrying about her. But that wasn't my problem. Not yet. I looked down at the mark on my wrist, feeling it pulse in time with my heartbeat. A month to live, maybe less. Dying slowly in a dungeon, or dying on the road trying to break an impossible curse. Not much of a choice. But it was more choice than I'd had in 2 years. I accept your bargain, I said. Dominic's shoulders dropped slightly, tension I hadn't noticed releasing. Good. We leave before dawn. Pack light. We'll be travelling as common wolves, not royalty. Do I get to leave this cell first, or should I pack the mouldy straw? The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. Come on, I've had quarters prepared for you. He led me out of the dungeons, through passages I'd never seen before. We moved in silence, the space between us humming with that incomplete bond. Every few steps, pain would lance through my wrist and I'd stumble. Each time, Dominic would slow, his own hand going to his marked wrist, his jaw tight with matching agony. We were bound together in the worst possible way, connected but incomplete, needing each other but unable to fully reach one another. The quarters he brought me to were modest but clean, tucked away in a forgotten corner of the palace, a bed with actual blankets, a wash basin, clean clothes laid out. Rest, Dominic said from the doorway. We have a long journey ahead. He started to leave, but I called out, Your Majesty? He turned back. Why me? The question had been burning in my chest since the corridor. You're the Alpha King. You could have any mate. Why would fate bind you to a rejected Omega? For a long moment, he just looked at me. Then he said, maybe fate knew I needed someone who understood what it meant to survive the impossible. He left before I could respond. We departed 3 hours before dawn, slipping out through a servant's entrance while the palace still slept. Dominic had been serious about travelling as common wolves. He wore rough travel clothes and a hood that shadowed his distinctive features. I wore similar garb, feeling strange in pants and boots instead of my servant's dress. Marcus Steele saw us off, his disapproval evident in every line of his body. "This is foolish, Your Majesty," he said. "You should send soldiers, not go yourself with her." "My decision is made, old friend." Dominic's voice carried the weight of command. "You know what to tell the council. That you're inspecting the northern borders." "Yes." Marcus's eyes cut to me with pure venom. "And when Lady Seraphina asks about the Omega who assaulted you?" "Tell her the girl has been dealt with." Marcus nodded, but I saw the calculation in his eyes. He was going to tell Seraphina everything. Men like him always did, justifying betrayal as loyalty to a higher cause. We were barely outside the palace grounds when the pain started. It began as a dull ache in my chest, like something was pulling at my ribs from the inside. I pressed my hand to my sternum and kept walking. Dominic moved ahead of me with the easy grace of a natural predator, his pace steady and ground-eating. The pain intensified with each step. By the time we reached the forest road leading away from the capital, I was biting my lip to keep from crying out. The incomplete bond was reacting to something. Distance? Stress? I didn't know enough about mate bonds to understand what was happening. Dominic stopped suddenly and turned. "You're in pain." "I'm fine. Don't lie to an alpha." He closed the distance between us, and the moment he got within arm's reach, the pain lessened. "The bond is unstable. It can't tolerate separation." "How far is the Shadowfen Marsh?" 5 days on foot. Maybe 4 if we push hard. 4 days of this. 4 days of agony whenever we were more than a few feet apart. I swallowed hard and nodded. "Then we'd better stay close." His expression darkened, but he didn't argue. We continued walking, now side by side, close enough that our shoulders occasionally brushed. Each casual contact sent sparks through the bond, pleasure mixing with pain in a dizzying cocktail. We walked through the morning and into the afternoon, stopping only briefly to eat and drink from a cold stream. Dominic was relentlessly efficient, a soldier comfortable with hardship. I pushed myself to match his pace, refusing to be the weak link. As the sun began to set, he led us off the main road into a dense copse of trees. "We'll camp here tonight," he said, already gathering wood for a fire. I helped in silence, too exhausted to make conversation. My wrist throbbed constantly now, the incomplete mark like a brand burning beneath my skin. When I glanced at Dominic, I saw him favouring his own marked wrist, though he tried to hide it. The fire caught quickly. Dominic produced travel rations from his pack, dried meat, hard cheese, stale bread. We ate in silence as darkness fell around us and the temperature dropped. "Tell me about your rejection," Dominic said suddenly. I nearly choked on my bread. "What?" "Your pack rejected you. I want to know why." "Does it matter?" "I'm trusting you with my life, Arya. I think I deserve to know who you are." "Fair enough." I took a breath and let the old shame wash over me. My mother was an Omega. My father was a low-ranking wolf in the Silvercrest pack. When I presented as Omega at 16, the Alpha decided I was too weak to be worth keeping. Omegas are rare, but not so rare that a small pack can't afford to throw one away if she's useless. Useless. His voice was flat. I couldn't fight, couldn't hunt well. I was good at healing, good with herbs and medicine, but the pack had other healers, stronger ones. I stared into the fire, watching flames dance. The Alpha rejected me formally, cast me out without a pack bond. I've been alone ever since. Until you ended up scrubbing my floors. Someone had to do it. I looked at him across the fire. Your turn. Tell me about the witch. Dominic's jaw worked. Her name was Morvana. She came to court 5 years ago with her daughter Elise. Beautiful girl, sharp as a blade, ambitious as hell. Morvana wanted Elise to be my queen. When I refused, she made threats. I had her escorted off the palace grounds. And she cursed you? That night, I felt it happen, like something vital being ripped out of my chest. I didn't understand what it was until I met Diana 6 months later. His voice went distant. The bond started forming, and within 3 days she was dying. Burning up with fever, delirious, the healers couldn't help. I rejected the bond, and she survived. But she was never the same. I'm sorry. Don't be. I did what I had to do. He stood abruptly. Get some sleep. We move at first light. But sleep didn't come easily. The temperature dropped further as night deepened, and the thin blanket Dominic had given me did little against the cold. I curled in on myself, teeth chattering, trying to will my body to warm up. You're freezing. I opened my eyes to find Dominic standing over me, his own blanket in hand. I'm fine, I said automatically, still lying to an alpha. He crouched beside me. The incomplete bond means our bodies are out of sync. You need body heat, and I'm the only source that will actually work because of the mate connection. I want you not to freeze to death before we reach the witch. His voice was gruff. This is practical, nothing more. He lay down behind me and pulled both blankets over us, his large body curving around mine like a shield against the cold. Heat radiated from him, immediate and overwhelming. I should have protested. Should have maintained some distance, some propriety. Instead, I melted back against him, and the bond sang. His arm came around my waist, and I felt him tense. Sleep, area. I did finally, wrapped in the warmth of the Alpha King, who was both my salvation and my doom. The next 3 days passed in a blur of walking, pain, and reluctant intimacy. The incomplete bond demanded constant proximity. If Dominic scouted ahead more than 30 feet, my chest would seize with pain. If I fell behind, his marked wrist would burn. We were tethered together by invisible chains, forced into a closeness neither of us wanted, but both of us needed. Forced closeness bred familiarity. I learned that Dominic woke before dawn every morning and did weapons drills by muscle memory. That he had a scar across his ribs from a border skirmish 3 years ago. That he hated sweet foods but would eat anything with salt. He learned that I hummed while I walked when I thought he wasn't listening. That I could identify most healing herbs on sight. That I'd never shifted into my wolf form. Not once since my rejection, because the pain of shifting without a pack bond was too much to bear. You should try, he said on the 3rd night. Having your wolf might make the bond more stable. Or it might kill me. I won't let it. The certainty in his voice made something twist in my chest. We didn't talk about the growing attraction between us. Didn't acknowledge the way his hand would linger on my waist when he helped me across a stream, or the way I'd catch myself staring at his mouth, remembering that first desperate kiss. The bond wanted completion. Our bodies knew it. Our wolves howled for it. But the curse held us apart. On the 4th day, we reached the edge of the Shadow Fen marsh. The landscape changed dramatically. Solid ground giving way to waterlogged earth, trees draped in moss, the air thick and heavy. Somewhere in this miserable swamp was Morvana's cottage. Somewhere in this swamp were our answers. We picked our way through the marsh as the sun climbed higher. The bond's pain had dulled to a constant ache, familiar now. Dominic led, moving with confidence despite the treacherous ground. Then he stopped. There, he said, pointing. Through the trees, I saw it, a cottage made of dark wood and stone, almost invisible among the marsh vegetation. But something was wrong. Even from a distance, I could see the broken windows, the collapsed roof. We approached cautiously. The cottage was destroyed. Not recently. This had happened years ago. The walls were blackened with old fire damage, the interior gutted and empty. Nothing remained but ash and ruin. "She's gone," I whispered. Dominic was already moving through the wreckage, searching for something, anything. I followed, picking through debris, finding nothing but burned wood and broken pottery. Then I saw the stone. It was large and flat, positioned deliberately in what must have been the cottage's centre. Carved into its surface were words, crude but legible. "The curse cannot be broken by the one who cast it, only by the one who paid for it." Dominic stood beside me, reading the message over my shoulder. "Someone hired her," he said slowly. "Someone paid Morvanna to curse me. But who? Someone who wanted me vulnerable. Someone who needed me to be unable to form a true mate bond." His voice went hard. "Someone who's been planning this for 5 years." I thought about the palace, about the political alliances and careful power structures, about Lady Seraphina and her northern pack, waiting to claim their queen's crown, about Marcus Steele and his calculation. "This conspiracy goes deeper than we thought," I said. Dominic's hand found mine, our marked wrists pressed together. The incomplete bond flared with heat, with pain, with desperate need. "Then we dig deeper," he said. "We find whoever paid for this curse, and we make them break it." But as I stood there in the ruins of the witch's cottage, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were already too late, that whoever wanted Dominic vulnerable had already won. Chapter 3. The morning after we found the burned cottage, we searched the ruins more carefully. Dominic moved through the debris with methodical precision, turning over every stone, examining every scrap of burned parchment. I worked beside him, my hands black with ash, my mind racing with questions. Who would pay to curse the Alpha King? Who had access to royal blood? And why go to such elaborate lengths to ensure Dominic could never complete a mate bond? "Here," Dominic called. I picked my way over to where he crouched near what had once been a cellar entrance. He held up a small metal box, somehow untouched by the fire that had consumed everything else. The metal was etched with protection runes, witch magic to preserve what was inside. His fingers worked the clasp, and the box opened with a soft click. Inside was a single piece of parchment, brittle with age, but still legible. Dominic read it first, and I watched his face go from concentration to shock to cold, lethal fury. "What is it?" He handed me the parchment without a word. It was a contract, written in a flowing hand, dated 5 years ago, detailing payment for services rendered. The witch Morvanna had been hired to curse the Alpha King, preventing him from ever completing a true mate bond. Payment received: 1 vial of royal blood and 10,000 gold marks. At the bottom, a signature, but the name had been deliberately burned away, leaving only the first letter visible. An elaborate, swirling ace. "Royal blood," I said slowly. "That means someone in my inner circle." Dominic's voice was lethal quiet. "Someone close enough to obtain my blood without raising suspicion. Someone who's been watching me suffer for 5 years, knowing exactly what they'd done. The signature starts with S. Seraphina." He said the name like a curse, but something didn't fit. 5 years ago, had you even met her?" Dominic's jaw worked. "No. She came to court 3 years ago with the Northern Pack Alliance, unless—" He stood abruptly, tucking the contract inside his jacket. "We need to talk to someone who deals in black market magic, someone who might remember the transaction." "You know someone like that?" The look he gave me was almost amused. "I'm the Alpha King, Arya. I know everyone like that." 2 days later, we stood in a dingy tavern on the outskirts of the Twilight Market, a place where wolves came to buy and sell things the law frowned upon. Magic, information, secrets. Dominic had left his royal bearing at the door, moving through the crowd like any other rough traveller. But I could feel the coiled power in him, the barely restrained dominance. Anyone with sense would know to stay away. We found our contact in a back room that smelled of old smoke and older magic. The dealer was a thin man with clever eyes and fingers that moved like spiders across the table. He went by Nix, and he dealt in magical artifacts, cursed objects, and information about both. "Morvanna," he said, tapping his lips thoughtfully. "Dead 3 years now. Burned in her own cottage. Suicide, they said. But I had my doubts. She was too shrewd for that." "We're interested in a curse she cast 5 years ago," Dominic said. "One involving royal blood." Nix's eyes sharpened with interest. "That information has value." Dominic dropped a heavy purse on the table. "So does gold." The dealer opened the purse, examined the contents, and smiled. "Morvanna kept detailed records, paranoid about getting double-crossed. After she died, her grimoire ended up in my possession." He pulled a leather-bound book from beneath the table and flipped through pages. "Here, a curse commissioned 5 years ago. Payment, royal blood and substantial gold, delivered by proxy." "Who was the proxy?" I asked. "She didn't record that, but she did note where the blood came from." Nix traced a line of text with one finger. "Not the king's blood, a family member's, someone with a direct bloodline connection, but not the king himself." Dominic went very still beside me. "My brother. Or your father, though he was already dead by then." Nix closed the book. "Whoever commissioned this curse had access to someone in the royal bloodline. The curse required that connection to work. It had to be tied to the king's own family magic." "Prince Caden," Dominic said flatly. "My brother has always resented being passed over for the throne." But Nix wasn't finished. "There's more?" Morvanna noted that the curse was specifically designed to prevent a true mate bond, but it had a secondary effect. It slowly weakens the cursed alpha's power, making him more malleable, more vulnerable to outside influence. My hand found Dominic's arm. "Someone's been trying to control you. For 5 years." His voice was ice. "Someone has been systematically weakening me, preventing me from bonding with a true mate who could anchor my power, all while positioning themselves to take advantage." Nick spread his hands. "I've told you what I know, but if I were you, I'd look at who's gained the most from your vulnerability. Who's risen to power in the last 5 years? Who stands to benefit from a king who can't complete a mate bond?" We left the Twilight Market with more questions than answers, but one thing was certain. We needed to return to the palace. The conspiracy was rooted there, and whoever had commissioned the curse was still working, still plotting, still dangerous. We slipped back into the palace 3 days later, using the same servants' entrance we'd left by, but this time we had a plan. Dominic would access the sealed royal records, looking for evidence of who had the opportunity and motive to obtain royal blood 5 years ago. I would do what Omegas did best, become invisible and listen. "Be careful," Dominic said before we separated. His hand lingered on my cheek, the incomplete bond singing between us. "If they suspect you're investigating." "I'm a servant. No one looks at servants." I caught his hand and pressed it against my marked wrist. "I'll be fine." He kissed me then, brief and desperate, before disappearing into the shadows toward the royal archives. I made my way to the kitchens, slipping back into the rhythm of palace life as if I'd never left. The other servants barely glanced at me. Omegas were forgettable beneath notice. It made us perfect spies. I spent the day moving through the palace, carrying trays and cleaning rooms, my ears open for anything useful. The servants' gossip network was extensive and surprisingly accurate. Within hours, I'd learned several interesting things. Prince Caden had been spending heavily lately, far beyond his allowance. The High Priestess had met privately with Lady Seraphina twice in the last week, and the king's former advisor, a man named Lord Theron, who'd served Dominic's father, had been asking questions about the king's whereabouts during his absence. Any one of them could be the traitor. That evening, I carried wine to a council meeting and stood motionless in the corner, while the kingdom's most powerful wolves debated policy. Dominic wasn't present. He was still in the archives, but Prince Caden was there, slouched in his chair with barely concealed contempt for the proceedings. "The king's absence is concerning," the high priestess said. Her voice was cool and measured. 2 weeks without word. "He's inspecting the northern borders," Lord Theron interrupted. "Marcus confirmed it." "Marcus says many things." Prince Caden's tone was mocking. "Doesn't make them true. I watched them argue, my omega senses picking up on undercurrents of emotion. Fear from some, ambition from others, and from Prince Caden, a strange mixture of guilt and anticipation. The meeting dragged on. I was about to leave when Lady Seraphina swept into the room, beautiful and cold as winter frost. "Gentlemen," High Priestess. She took a seat at the table as if she belonged there, as if she were already queen. "We need to discuss the king's situation." "What situation?" Lord Theron asked carefully. Seraphina's smile was sharp. "The situation where our king may have formed a mate bond with a packless omega. A bond that threatens our alliance with the northern packs. A bond that makes him weak." The room went silent. "How did you—" the High Priestess started. "I have my sources." Seraphina's eyes swept the room. "The question is, what do we do about it? A true mate bond could strengthen the king, make him less amenable to counsel. We've all benefited from his current vulnerability. Do we really want that to change?" I pressed myself flatter against the wall, horror creeping up my spine. They knew. They all knew about the curse, about Dominic's weakness, and they'd been exploiting it. "The bond is incomplete," Prince Caden said. "Marcus reported that the mark is corrupted. They'll both die from it within weeks. Unless they break the curse." Seraphina's voice was silk over steel. "Which is why we need to ensure they don't get that chance." I didn't wait to hear more. I slipped out of the room and ran. I found Dominic in the archives, surrounded by old ledgers and documents. He looked up when I burst in, immediately reading the panic on my face. "What happened?" "They know," I gasped, "about the curse, about the bond. Seraphina knows, and she's planning something. They're all planning something." Dominic's expression went cold and hard. "Tell me everything." I repeated what I'd overheard. When I finished, Dominic was on his feet, pacing like a caged wolf. "They've been working together," he said. "Not all of them, maybe, but enough, keeping me weak, vulnerable, easy to manipulate. And Seraphina." He slammed his fist on the table. "She's been positioning herself to rule through me, knowing I could never form a true mate bond to challenge her influence." "What about your brother?" "Caden's involved, but he's not the mastermind. He doesn't have the patience for long-term planning." Dominic pulled out several documents. I found the records of blood drawn from the royal family 5 years ago. There was a medical examination. Routine testing, Caden, myself, my father's body before burial. Any of those samples could have been stolen. By who? The royal physician at the time was... Dominic checked a name. Dr. Silas Mordain. Dead now, killed in a hunting accident 2 years ago. Convenient? Very. He gathered the documents. Someone has been eliminating loose ends. Morvanna burned in her cottage. Dr. Mordain dead. Anyone who could connect the conspiracy to its source is gone. I moved to his side, my hand finding his. "What do we do?" He stopped, his eyes focusing on something behind me. I turned to find the High Priestess standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Your Majesty," she said softly, "you've returned." Dominic's body tensed, ready for a fight. "How long have you been standing there?" "Long enough." She stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. "You're investigating the curse. Smart. But you're looking in the wrong places. Are you going to tell me where to look, or are you here to stop me?" The High Priestess's expression softened. "I opposed many of your reforms, Your Majesty. I thought you were too young, too idealistic. But I never wanted you cursed. I never wanted you weak." She moved closer. 5 years ago, I was approached about a plan to manage the young king. Make him easier to guide. I refused, but I knew others wouldn't. Who? The word was a command. Lord Theron. He served your father loyally, but he never accepted your rule. He wanted the kingdom to continue as it had been. Conservative, traditional, resistant to change. Your reforms threatened everything he believed in. Dominic's jaw clenched. Theron commissioned the curse. I believe so, but I could never prove it. The High Priestess met his eyes. Be careful, Your Majesty. Theron is more dangerous than you know. He spent 5 years building power while you've been weakened, and he has allies everywhere. She left as quietly as she'd come. Dominic and I stood in the silence of the archives, the weight of conspiracy pressing down around us. We need proof, I said finally, real proof we can use against him. Then we keep digging. Dominic pulled me close, his forehead resting against mine. But tonight I need you. The incomplete bond flared between us, desperate and demanding. We'd been denying it for days, pushing through the pain and need, because acknowledging it meant accepting we might both die. But standing there in the dim archive, I didn't care anymore. Take me somewhere safe, I whispered, somewhere we can be alone. Dominic's private chambers were nothing like I'd imagined. I'd expected opulence, grandeur, the trappings of royalty. Instead, the rooms were almost sparse. Functional furniture, weapons on the walls, books stacked on every surface. I don't spend much time here, he said, as if reading my thoughts. The throne room, the council chamber, those are where kings live. This is just where I sleep. It feels like you, I said. He turned to me and the look in his eyes made my breath catch. Raw need mixed with something deeper, something that made the incomplete bond sing with desperate hope. Arya, my name was a prayer on his lips. If we do this, the bond will try to complete itself. The curse will fight back. It could kill us both. I know. We might not survive the night. I know, I said again, moving closer. But I'm tired of surviving, Dominic. I want to live, even if it's just for tonight. He closed the distance between us, his hands framing my face with unexpected gentleness. You're the bravest person I've ever met. Or the stupidest. That too. He smiled, and it transformed his face from harsh to beautiful. Last chance to run, little Omega. Instead of answering, I kissed him. The bond exploded between us. It was nothing like the desperate press of lips in the corridor when I'd saved his life. This was fire and need and recognition. Our wolves finally allowed to acknowledge what they'd known from the first moment. Mine. 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 Dominic growled against my mouth, his hand sliding down to lift me against him. I wrapped my legs around his waist, feeling his strength, his heat, the barely controlled power of an alpha, finally allowing himself to claim his mate. We barely made it to the bed. Clothes disappeared between kisses. His hands mapped my body like he was memorizing every curve, every scar. When his lips found the mark on my wrist, I gasped at the jolt of pleasure pain that shot through the incomplete bond. Does it hurt? He asked against my skin. Yes, I admitted. But don't stop. He didn't. What happened next was beyond description. The mate bond, even incomplete and corrupted, was powerful enough to turn physical intimacy into something transcendent. Every touch, every kiss, every joining of our bodies sent golden light cascading through the bond, trying desperately to bridge the gap the curse had created. For the first time in 5 years, Dominic felt complete. I could feel it through the bond, the way his wolf settled, the way his power steadied and strengthened with a mate to anchor it. For the first time in 2 years, I felt chosen, wanted, whole. We made love like it was our last night alive, because it might be. The curse fought us, sending waves of pain through our marked wrists, trying to sever what was forming between us. But we held on, held together, refusing to let go. When we finally collapsed, tangled in sheets and each other, the bond hummed between us, still incomplete, still corrupted, but stronger than before. "I love you," Dominic said into the darkness. "I don't care if we've only known each other 2 weeks. I don't care if this bond is impossible. I love you, Aria." Tears leaked from my eyes. "I love you too." We fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, the incomplete bond, a warm pulse between our hearts. For one perfect night, we were just mates, not a king and a rejected Omega, not cursed and dying, just two wolves who'd found each other against impossible odds. It couldn't last. The summons came the next morning. A formal feast was being held in 3 days' time to celebrate the potential alliance with the northern packs. All court members were required to attend, including the king's chosen mate, Lady Seraphina. "It's a trap," I said, reading the elegant script. Dominic stood at the window, his shoulders tense. "Of course it is. But I can't refuse without raising suspicion. The court expects me to announce my engagement to Seraphina at this feast." "What are you going to do? Tell the truth." He turned to me, his eyes burning with determination. "I'm going to announce you as my true mate and reject the arrangement with Seraphina. That will start a war with the northern packs. Then we'll fight a war." He crossed to me, taking my hands. "I'm done playing politics while we both die. 3 days, Aria. In 3 days, I claim you publicly, and we deal with whatever comes." I wanted to believe it could be that simple, but the look in his eyes said he knew better. We spent the next 2 days gathering evidence against Lord Theron, building a case we could present to the council. Dominic used his authority to access sealed documents while I continued my invisible surveillance, piecing together the conspiracy. By the morning of the feast, we had enough to prove Theron's involvement. Not enough to completely destroy him, but enough to raise serious questions. It would have to be enough. I dressed carefully for the feast, wearing a gown Dominic had provided, simple but elegant, in deep forest green. My marked wrist was covered with a bracelet, but I could feel it pulsing beneath the metal. The feast hall was magnificent, filled with the most powerful wolves in the kingdom. I entered on Dominic's arm, feeling every eye turn toward us. Whispers erupted immediately. Lady Seraphina sat at the high table, beautiful as always, her expression unreadable. The meal proceeded with agonizing formality. Course after course, speech after speech. Dominic's hand never left mine beneath the table, our bond thrumming with nervous energy. Then Seraphina stood. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice carrying across the hall, "I believe we have a matter to settle before any announcements are made tonight." Dominic's grip tightened on my hand. "What matter?" "The matter of this Omega you've brought to court." Seraphina's smile was poisonous. "The one you claim as your mate, despite our arrangement, despite the alliance our bond represents." The hall went silent. "Aria is my true mate," Dominic said clearly. "The bond formed without intention or manipulation. I will not reject it." "Then I invoke the trial of mates," Seraphina's voice rang out, "an ancient law that allows a chosen mate to challenge a true mate for the right to stay. Aria of no pack. I challenge you to combat. 3 days from now, we fight. Winner keeps the king, loser is banished from the kingdom forever." Horror crashed through me. Trial by combat. Against a trained warrior, a northern pack wolf who'd been fighting since childhood. "You can refuse," Dominic said urgently, turning to me. "Refusing just means banishment. You don't have to fight her." But I knew what refusal meant. It meant running, hiding, letting Seraphina win. It meant Dominic would remain cursed, would die slowly while a false mate ruled beside him. "I accept," I heard myself say. The hall erupted in shocked murmurs. Seraphina's smile turned triumphant. 3 days, little Omega," she purred. "Prepare to die." Before Dominic could respond, the hall doors burst open. Guards entered, followed by a man I'd prayed never to see again. Alpha Garrett of the Silvercrest Pack, my former Alpha, the one who'd rejected me and cast me out. He looked exactly as I remembered. Cruel eyes, thin lips twisted in a permanent sneer. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing mockingly to Dominic, "I've come to reclaim my property." "Your property?" Dominic's voice was deadly quiet. "The Omega girl." Garrett gestured toward me. "Aria. She was never officially released from her pack bonds. She fled in the night, stealing supplies and coin. By law, she remains mine to discipline and punish as I see fit." "That's a lie," I gasped. "I never stole anything. You rejected me." "I rejected your petition for release, yes, but the paperwork was never filed." Garrett produced a thick folder of documents. "Everything is legal and documented. She belongs to Silvercrest Pack. She belongs to me." Dominic stood, his alpha power rolling through the room like a physical force. "She is my mate. She goes nowhere." "Then you'll start a war between packs," Garrett said calmly. "The law is clear, Your Majesty. Unless she was formally released, which she wasn't, she remains bound to her birth pack. You cannot interfere without breaking centuries of pack law." The room spun around me. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not when we were so close to breaking the curse. Dominic looked at the documents and I saw the moment he realized Garrett was right. Pack law was absolute. Even kings couldn't override it without risking everything. "Aria," Dominic said, reaching for me. But guards were already moving, sent by Garrett, legally entitled to retrieve me. "No," I said, backing away. "Dominic, don't let them." "I'll fix this," he swore. "I'll find a way." Garrett's guards grabbed my arms. I struggled, but they were stronger, trained wolves against a rejected Omega who'd never been allowed to train. "Wait!" I screamed as they dragged me toward the door. The incomplete bond flared with agony, both mine and Dominic's, as the distance grew between us. Garrett commissioned the curse. He was paid to reject me, to ensure I'd never be anyone's mate, especially not the king's. The hall exploded in chaos. Dominic lunged forward, but Lord Theron and other council members blocked his path, citing law and procedure and political consequences. "He's working with them," I screamed as the guards pulled me through the door. "Garrett and Theron and Seraphina, they're all working together. They planned this from the beginning." The last thing I saw before they dragged me into the corridor was Dominic's face, rage and helplessness and absolute devastation. Then the door slammed shut, and I was alone with my former Alpha, the man who'd sold me to a conspiracy I was only beginning to understand. Garrett smiled down at me, and it was the cruelest thing I'd ever seen. "Hello, Aria," he said softly. "Did you really think you could escape what you are? What you'll always be?" His hand closed around my marked wrist, squeezing until I screamed with pain. "Mine," he whispered. "You were always mine." The incomplete bond shattered like glass, and everything went black. Chapter 4. The cell smelled like blood and despair. I woke with my cheek pressed against cold stone, my wrists raw from silver chains. Every breath sent pain lancing through my ribs, broken, probably, from when Garrett's guards had thrown me down here, the Silvercrest Pack compound. I'd sworn I'd never see this place again. Footsteps echoed down the corridor. I didn't bother trying to move. The silver chains had sapped what little strength I had left, and the incomplete bond was screaming in agony, severed from Dominic by too much distance, too much interference. I was dying. I could feel it happening, cell by cell. The door opened, and Alpha Garrett stepped inside, followed by 2 guards. He looked pleased with himself, practically preening. "Awake. Good." He crouched in front of me, close enough that I could smell the whiskey on his breath. "We have so much to discuss, little Aria, so many secrets to share." "Go to hell," I managed through split lips. He laughed. "Still fighting. I always admired that about you, even when I had to beat it out of you." He grabbed my chin, forcing me to look at him. "Do you want to know why I rejected you? The real reason?" I said nothing. 5 years ago, I was approached by a very ambitious prince and a very clever Northern Pack she-wolf. They had a problem. The new young king was too strong, too reformist, too popular. They needed him weakened, controllable. They needed him cursed. Garrett's smile widened. But curses like that require specific conditions. Royal blood, yes, but also a sacrifice. A wolf who could have been the king's mate, rejected and cast out, doomed to suffer while he suffered. Poetic, really. Horror crawled up my spine. You rejected me as part of the curse. I was paid very well to do it. 50,000 gold marks to identify an Omega in my pack who might be compatible with the Alpha King. Something about bloodline magic. I didn't care about the details. And reject her formally. Make sure she'd never be worthy of any pack, especially not royalty. He leaned closer. You were supposed to die in a gutter somewhere, forgotten and alone. The curse required your suffering to maintain its power. But I survived. You survived, he agreed. More than that, you thrived. Got yourself into the palace, saved the king's life, triggered the mate bond, despite the curse trying to prevent it. His expression darkened. You ruined everything, Arya. 5 years of careful planning, undone because you were too stubborn to die properly. I wanted to spit in his face, but I didn't have the strength. Dominic will come for me. Will he? Even if he could break pack law without starting a civil war, which he can't, Prince Caden and Lady Seraphina have spent the last 3 days consolidating power. By now, half the military supports them. The council is divided. If your precious king tries to rescue you, he'll lose his throne. Garrett stood, brushing off his knees. No, little Omega. You're going to die down here, alone and forgotten, exactly as you were supposed to 5 years ago. And once you're dead, the king's incomplete bond will drive him mad. Prince Caden will take the throne. Seraphina will rule as his queen, and everyone gets what they want. Except Dominic. Except Dominic, Garrett agreed cheerfully. But sacrifices must be made for the greater good. He left, his laughter echoing down the corridor. I slumped against the wall, silver chains burning my wrists. My marked arm throbbing with agony. The incomplete bond was a raw wound in my chest, screaming for a mate I couldn't reach. This was how I died. Not in glory, not fighting for anything. Just alone in a cell. A rejected Omega who dared to dream above her station. No. The thought came from somewhere deep inside, somewhere that had nothing to do with the broken girl chained to a wall and everything to do with the wolf I'd suppressed for 2 years. No. My wolf surged forward with such force that I gasped. She'd been silent since my rejection, too wounded to speak, too traumatized to emerge. But now she was howling, raging, refusing to accept this end. We are more, she snarled. We have always been more. Power bubbled up from my core, unfamiliar and terrifying. It felt like the healing magic I'd used to save Dominic, but stronger, deeper, more fundamental. This wasn't just Omega healing energy. This was authority. The chains began to glow, not from the silver burning my skin, but from something inside me, pushing back against the metal, the power built and built, pressure behind a dam that was about to break. I thought of Dominic, alone in the palace, surrounded by traitors. I thought of the conspiracy that had stolen 5 years of his life, had stolen my entire existence, had twisted and corrupted everything good into weapons. I thought of every wolf who'd ever been rejected, cast out, deemed unworthy because they didn't fit some arbitrary standard of strength, and I let the dam break. The power exploded outward in a pulse of pure golden light. The chains shattered, the cell door blew off its hinges, and every wolf in the compound, guards, pack members, Alpha Garrett himself, dropped to their knees as if struck by a physical force, a queen's command. The rarest Omega power, possessed only by prime Omegas born once in a century, equal in authority to an Alpha King's dominance, but different, where an alpha commanded through strength, a prime omega commanded through undeniable rightness. I stood on shaking legs, power still crackling around me like lightning. Garrett stared up at me from the corridor floor, his face twisted with shock and fear. Impossible. You're just what? My voice echoed with power I was only beginning to understand. Just an omega? Just a rejected wolf not worth keeping? I walked toward him and he scrambled backward. You rejected me because you knew. Deep down, you knew what I could become and it terrified you. You were weak, he gasped, small, useless. I was young, untrained, traumatized. I crouched in front of him and he couldn't look away. The Queen's command held him pinned. But I was never weak. You just needed me to believe I was. Other pack members were gathering, drawn by the pulse of power. I saw familiar faces, wolves who'd suffered under Garrett's rule, omegas and low-ranking pack members who'd been abused and discarded. Who here has been rejected, I called out. Who here has been told they're worthless, that they don't deserve a pack, a mate, a life? Slowly, hands rose, more than I'd expected, nearly half the wolves present. Who here is tired of alphas who rule through fear instead of earning loyalty? More hands, more wolves stepping forward, their eyes meeting mine with something like hope. Then come with me, I said. I'm going back to the palace. I'm going to save my mate and end a conspiracy that's poisoned our world for 5 years, and I'm going to change the laws that let wolves like Garrett destroy lives without consequence. I looked around at the assembled wolves. I can't promise it will be easy. I can't promise we'll all survive, but I can promise you'll never be rejected again. Not by me, not by anyone. The first wolf who stepped forward was young, barely 18, with scars on her arms from abuse. I'll follow you. Then another, and another, until 20 wolves stood with me, rejected and discarded, choosing to follow a prime omega who'd just discovered her own power. Garrett tried to rise, tried to reassert his authority. You're still bound to this pack by law. Your laws, I interrupted, not mine. Not anymore. I looked down at him with something that might have been pity if he'd deserved it. You're finished, Garrett. Your alpha authority is revoked. This pack answers to someone else now. I didn't kill him, didn't even hurt him beyond the bruising his ego would suffer. I just walked away, my new pack following, leaving him kneeling in the ruins of his own compound. We had a palace to reach and a king to save. The journey back took 2 days of hard travel. My new pack, I'd started thinking of them that way, moved with purpose, driven by the same determination that burned in my chest. The incomplete bond was still there, still painful, but different now. I could feel Dominic through it, sense his rage and desperation and growing instability. The bond was driving him feral without me near, his alpha instincts screaming at him to find his mate, retrieve his mate, protect his mate. He was losing control, and I wasn't there to anchor him. We pushed harder, travelling through the night. By the time we reached the palace, chaos had already erupted. Smoke rose from the east wing. The sounds of fighting echoed across the grounds. Prince Caden's coup had begun. What do we do? Asked Sarah, the young omega who'd been first to follow me. I looked at the palace, my home now, whether the court accepted it or not. Somewhere inside, Dominic was fighting for his throne, his life, his kingdom. Fighting alone because I'd been taken from him. We end this, I said, once and for all. We entered through a servant's entrance, my old knowledge of the palace layout guiding us through passages most people didn't know existed. The sounds of fighting grew louder as we climbed higher, the throne room. I burst through the doors to find absolute carnage. Dominic stood at the centre, surrounded by loyal guards, his eyes wild, with barely contained feral rage. His clothes were torn and bloody, his face marked with claw wounds. Prince Caden stood opposite him, flanked by Northern Pack soldiers, and there, beautiful and deadly, was Lady Seraphina, her sword drawn and already stained red. "You can't win, brother," Caden was saying. "Half the court supports us. The military is mine. Surrender the throne and I'll let you live out your days in exile." "Never." Dominic's voice was more growl than words. The incomplete bond was tearing him apart, his alpha instincts unravelling without a mate to ground him. Then he saw me. Everything stopped. Dominic's eyes locked on mine across the throne room, and the incomplete bond flared so bright it was almost visible. Relief, joy, desperate need. All of it crashed through our connection. "Arya," he breathed. "Miss me?" I walked into the throne room, my new pack fanning out behind me. 20 wolves against Caden's 50, but numbers didn't matter anymore. Seraphina laughed. "The little Omega returns. How touching. Did you escape your former alpha, or did he let you go?" "Neither. I broke free using power your conspiracy never anticipated." I met her cold gaze. "You wanted me weak and rejected. You needed me suffering to maintain the curse, but you made a mistake. You underestimated what I could become." "You're still just an Omega," Caden sneered. "A rejected wolf with delusions of grandeur." I smiled. "Want to test that theory?" I released a pulse of Queen's command. Every wolf in the room felt it, the undeniable authority of a prime Omega, the rarest power in our world. Caden's soldiers wavered, their loyalty suddenly uncertain. Even Seraphina took a step back, her eyes widening with shock. "Impossible," she whispered. "Very possible," I said, "and very inconvenient for your plans." Dominic moved to my side, his hand finding mine. The moment we touched, the incomplete bond steadied, the agony lessening to a manageable ache. His feral edge receded, his control returning. "Together?" he asked softly. "Always." Caden snarled and lunged. His soldiers followed. The battle was brief and brutal. Dominic and I fought side by side, the incomplete bond somehow amplifying our coordination. I could feel his intentions through our connection. Move with him in perfect synchronization. My prime Omega power let me command loyalty from wolves who'd been forced into Caden's service, turning his own soldiers against him. But it was Seraphina who provided the real challenge. She came at me with a warrior's skill, her sword singing through the air. I barely dodged, my body remembering the training my grandmother had given me before my rejection, skills I'd thought long lost. We circled each other, predator and predator. "You're strong," Seraphina admitted. "Stronger than I anticipated, but you're still untrained, still soft." "Maybe," I said, "but I'm not fighting for power or politics." "Then what are you fighting for?" "Love," I lunged, catching her off guard. "Something you'll never understand." Our battle raged across the throne room. She was better trained, more experienced. But I had something she didn't. Absolute certainty in why I was fighting. Every strike I blocked was for Dominic. Every attack I launched was for every rejected wolf who'd been told they were worthless. Finally, I disarmed her. Her sword clattering across the floor, she dropped to her knees, breathing hard, defeated. "Kill me," she said. "That's what you want, isn't it? Revenge?" I looked down at her. This beautiful wolf who'd conspired to destroy the man I loved, who'd planned to rule through manipulation and fear. "No," I said, "I want you gone. Banished from this kingdom, stripped of your titles and lands. Live with the knowledge that you lost not to a better warrior, but to a better person." Seraphina's face twisted with rage and humiliation, but she had no choice. The Queen's command in my voice left no room for argument. Across the room, Prince Caden had been cornered by his own hired assassins. When he couldn't produce the payment he'd promised, they'd turned on him with mercenary efficiency. He died, as he'd lived, betrayed by those he thought he could buy. The throne room fell silent except for heavy breathing and the groans of the wounded. We'd won. But the curse remained. The High Priestess emerged from the shadows where she'd been watching. Her ancient eyes swept the carnage, then settled on Dominic and me, still standing hand in hand. "The conspiracy is ended," she said, "but the curse remains. You two are still dying, just more slowly now that you're together." "There has to be a way to break it," Dominic said. "There is." The High Priestess moved closer. "I've been researching since you left for the Shadowfen Marsh. The witch Morvanna designed this curse with a failsafe, a way to break it if certain conditions were met." "What conditions?" I asked. "A prime Omega's willing sacrifice, her life for her mate's freedom." The High Priestess looked at me with something like sympathy. "Arya must die to break the curse. Only then will Dominic be free to live without the incomplete bond killing him." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. "No." Dominic's voice was absolute. "There has to be another way." "There isn't." "The curse was designed to be unbreakable except through ultimate sacrifice." "Then I'll live with the curse, Maggie," he interrupted. "I'll die from it before I sacrifice her." "Dominic," I started. "No, Arya, I won't lose you. Not after everything." I looked at this man who'd become everything to me, king, mate, partner in all ways. The incomplete bond pulsed between us, painful but also beautiful in its own broken way. "What if we choose differently?" I asked the High Priestess. "What if we refuse the sacrifice? What if we decide to live together, incomplete bond and all, for whatever time we have left?" "Then you'll both die within the year," she said bluntly. "Perhaps sooner. The curse will consume you both." "But we'll die together," Dominic said, squeezing my hand. "Mated, bonded, choosing each other until the end." "Yes," the High Priestess said slowly. "You would die together, refusing to sacrifice one another, choosing love over survival." Something shifted in her expression. Understanding dawned. "What?" I demanded. "The curse," she breathed. "Morvanna designed it based on her belief that true love didn't exist. That everyone would eventually choose survival over sacrifice, power over partnership. She built the failsafe expecting someone would take it, that a mate would eventually give their life to save their partner. But she never anticipated two mates choosing to die together rather than sacrifice each other," Dominic finished. The High Priestess nodded. "Mutual, selfless love. Not one person sacrificing for another, but both choosing each other over survival. That was never supposed to happen. The curse has no defense against it." Light began to build in my chest, in my marked wrist, in the space where the incomplete bond pulsed. Not golden this time, but white, pure and absolute and undeniable. Dominic gasped as the same light emerged from his own mark. The incomplete bond began to heal. I felt it happening, the jagged edges smoothing out. The corruption burning away, the curse dissolving like morning mist under sunlight. The bond that had been broken and incomplete was reforging itself, stronger and truer than before. The light grew blinding. When it faded, I was on my knees gasping. Dominic knelt beside me, his hand pressed over his heart. On our wrists, the marks had changed. Still crescent moons wrapped in thorns, but complete now, whole, beautiful. The mate bond snapped into place with such force that we both cried out. It was everything the incomplete bond had been and more. Connection, understanding, love so profound it rewrote the very foundation of who we were. I felt Dominic's heart beat in time with mine. Felt his wolf recognize mine completely. Felt his love wash over me in waves that left me breathless. "Arya," he whispered. And it was prayer and promise and forever, all at once. "Dominic," I breathed back. He kissed me then, in front of the entire court, in front of our allies and defeated enemies. He kissed me like I was air and he'd been drowning, like I was home and he'd been lost. The complete mate bond sang between us, golden and perfect and utterly unbreakable. When we finally broke apart, the throne room had fallen completely silent. The High Priestess smiled. "Behold your queen," she said to the assembled wolves, "not an Omega who rose above her station, but a prime who finally came into her power. Not chosen for politics or alliance, but bound by true love and proven through sacrifice. Queen Aria Blackthorn and mate to the Alpha King. The wolves began to kneel, first the ones who'd followed me from Silvercrest, then Dominic's loyal guards, then, slowly, even those who'd fought for Caden, recognizing the authority in my presence, the undeniable rightness of a prime Omega crowned queen. Dominic took my hand and led me to the throne. Instead of sitting while I stood, he pulled me down beside him, equal in every way. "The old laws are ended," he declared, his voice carrying through the hall. "No more rejections without consent, no more ownership of pack members, no more treating Omegas as lesser. We build something new now, a kingdom where every wolf has value, regardless of rank or designation." Cheers erupted. Later, much later, after the wounded had been tended and the dead honoured, after Seraphina had been escorted to the border and Caden's conspirators arrested, Dominic and I stood alone on the palace balcony, watching the sun set over the kingdom. "How does it feel?" he asked, his arm around my waist. "Being queen?" "Terrifying," I admitted. "Overwhelming, right." He kissed my temple. "You'll be magnificent." "We'll be magnificent," I corrected. "Together." The complete mate bond hummed between us, warm and steady and eternal. I could feel his contentment, his love, his absolute certainty that we'd face whatever came next, side by side. "I love you," I said, turning in his arms. "I love you," he replied. "My mate, my queen, my everything." We kissed as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Two wolves who'd found each other against impossible odds and rewritten the rules of an entire world in the process. 6 months later, I stood on that same balcony, my hand resting on the gentle swell of my stomach. Twins, the healers had confirmed. A boy and a girl, both healthy, both already showing signs of the unique power that came from being born of a prime Omega and an Alpha King's true mate bond. Dominic came up behind me, his hands covering mine over our children. "What are you thinking?" "About how different everything is," I said. 6 months ago, I was scrubbing floors. Now I'm queen, pregnant with heirs, watching packs from across the realm gather to celebrate the new era. Below us, wolves from every corner of the kingdom had assembled. The reforms were already taking effect. Rejected wolves being welcomed back into packs, Omegas training as healers, and diplomats and warriors. The old hierarchy was crumbling, replaced by something better, something built on respect instead of fear. "They said an Omega's kiss was worthless," I whispered, remembering that desperate moment in the corridor when everything had changed. Dominic turned me in his arms, his hand coming up to cup my face. He kissed my completed mate mark, and I felt his love pulse through our bond. "They were wrong," he growled softly, his eyes burning with devotion. "Your kiss didn't just save my life, it changed the entire world." I kissed him then, deep and slow, and full of promise. Around us, our kingdom stretched out in all directions, full of wolves who'd been rejected, discarded, told they were worthless. Wolves who were learning, finally, that they'd always been more than enough, that they'd always been worthy of love. Just like me. The end. Thank you for listening to this story. Like, share, and subscribe for more.